Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 6:01 a.m. East Coast time, Wednesday, June 19th, and we're going to break down this two-game WNBA slate tonight. Hope everybody who is in the WNBA streets did well last night. I did well once again, even for a showdown slate. It's very hard to judge your actual skill level when playing a showdown slate, right? Because any given night, if just one girl, one player, no matter the sport, exceeds expectations, which is going to happen on most nights, well, then you kind of have to have that player. And if you don't, your whole showdown slate is ruined. Unless you're playing cash, maybe you can survive. So showdown slate's not a great way to kind of evaluate your skill set. Don't be like, oh, I won this showdown slate, I am now a pro in DFS. No, you're probably going to lose all that money if you continue to play showdown slates, especially at increased entry fees. So I hope everybody did well last night. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sal Vetri. I cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL streets, NBA, MLB, golf, WNBA. Very excited about the WNBA. My podcast, which you can go, the Sal Vetri Show, kind of did a little bit of a rejuvenation of that the other day, just a little bit of an intro. I think I'm going to be releasing another podcast episode that's going to focus a little bit on why I'm covering the WNBA. People are telling me, why are you spending time covering this WNBA? You can't watch the games are boring. The reason why is it's so profitable if you have a projection system and if you follow news closely, which is very hard to do for a lot of people, if not everybody. I mean, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. or earlier to cover baseball as well, to cover golf some days, but also to cover the WNBA. It takes up a lot of the time, and I enjoy breaking down into the numbers because it is the most projectable sport, and if you can project it correctly, there's major upside. 6 days in a row, I've now profited in cash. That's all 6 days that I've played the WNBA this year. And yes, there's hot streaks in DFS, but there's also times where it's like, okay, we're doing something right here. We have something that many people don't, a projection system, minute projections, points, DVP. So I think that it's a huge leverage spot. Also, just understanding the news and being able to keep up with news right before lock and understanding where minutes are going to go when players are out, understanding and picking up on when players are moving overseas, which happens literally hours before the game and you don't even know about it. So crazy sport. Let's get into it. Hit me with a thumbs up before we get into this. If you subscribe, it helps me even more, helps me build an audience. Look, if you're watching this video right now and you're not subscribed, take 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds, and hit that subscribe button. Helps me out. Hit the notification bell if you will. If you're a returning subscriber, you know how much you mean to me. I will notify everybody that I do have Patreon. That is where my projections are. It's a website that is for creators. It just allows us to make more money than YouTube would ever allow us to make. They take a lot of the percentage of any of the ads and things like that. So Patreon is where I host my projections. I am no longer showing projections in these videos. The last week I've showed my projections in the videos. I will show it in a different format, my early interests, a couple of players that I like in different price ranges, different value type plays. But if you want my full projections, the biggest things are the minute projections, and obviously you're going to get what I believe the point scoring is going to be for that night. I think there's only like 1 or 2 other websites that do this, and neither of them are free. So if you want my full projections, you can go over to Patreon. People have been signing up and leaving comments that they're helping a lot, so I'm excited about that. I truly believe more than anything else that projections for WNBA cash and tournaments in general, your cash lineups and your tournaments, is the biggest edge in all of daily fantasy sports in terms of for lower stakes players. Now, if you're a high stakes player and you're entering 150 lineups into a GPP, well, that's probably the biggest edge, right? Having a very good projection system is the next biggest edge. And in terms of WNBA, there is probably at most 5% of the field using a projection system, whereas in the NBA, there's probably 50+% of the field using a projection system. So it's a huge difference. You're playing a lot of fish. You're playing a lot of people who are going to roster girls who aren't going to even see anywhere near 20 minutes in their lineup, and that's not what you want to do each night. So let's start it off with the injury news. Rebecca Allen is going to remain out once again with a finger injury. She's been out for a while now. It's approaching a month, so nothing really changes here for New York. We'll continue to see some of the same players getting minutes, which we'll touch on. Victoria, I hope I'm saying this right, Malka Cawley, she was just signed recently, picked up, so she's not going to have any minutes in terms of games or any production so far this year. I have her projected, and we'll get to it, for about 5 minutes today. Nothing major, nothing that puts her in play, but something to keep an eye on, as they did just sign her, I believe, on Thursday. Shanice Johnson is questionable. Shanice Johnson has missed a couple of games now with this knee injury. She's somebody who does see decent minutes per game, 16 minutes per game. Maybe not enough for me to actually want to play her if she does play, but it is important to be able to allocate those minutes elsewhere, which I have done in the projections. Chloe Jackson is doubtful today. I believe Chloe Jackson has actually recently been ruled out today with an ankle injury. Nothing major there, only sees 6 minutes per game, but good to note. Astu Nador, another person who doesn't see major minutes, but she is still under suspension. I don't know if she is playing overseas. Nothing has been reported with that. Usually if a player plays overseas, they suspend the player from their team. Just, I don't know if it's a formality. I don't know if it has to do with pay. But yeah, that's what's happening with Nador. The biggest one on the slate, by far the biggest injury news on the slate that a lot of people are going to overlook is Alex Bentley. Alex Bentley's been playing for Atlanta every single game, been playing big minutes, 23 minutes per game average, 22.8 to be exact. Fantasy points per game, it's not terrible, 15. This is a quality role player. I mean, 23 minutes in the WNBA equivalates to like around 30, or right around 30 in the NBA. Now, we obviously know if you're somebody who plays NBA that 30 minutes in the NBA, if that just magically disappears, well, somebody's going to be eating, if not multiple people in terms of more minutes. So she's playing overseas. This literally just happened. This is the first game they'll be playing without her. So she's a guard. There's going to be guards on this Atlanta team that now pick up extra run. And yes, I do have interest in them. And if you stay through the video, we'll get to those early interests. So this is the injury and status dashboard. By far the biggest news is that Alex Bentley is now playing overseas, is suspended from this Atlanta team, and other guards are going to have to, and we'll be seeing just forced into more minutes, which is a good thing. Let's go over to the target offense sheet today. So four teams, 2 games, nothing major here. A few things I guess we can point out really early, and let me actually just make sure that this is all adding up correctly. It is. So based on this Indiana-Atlanta game, it's going to be slight pace-up spot for Indiana and a pace-down spot for Atlanta. So team pace right here, yes, this is correct. Okay, cool. So what you're seeing is pace just means possessions per game. If you're new here, we are getting a lot of new subscribers, or new just people in general. And if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. Thank you. But pace is just how many possessions they get in a game. Obviously, the more possessions, the better. So the bigger pace spot in terms of this game, and by far the bigger total, the better game to target out of these two is Chicago and New York. A lot of things to like here. One, both teams shoot more efficiently and they play at higher paces. Each of the teams in the Chicago and New York game play at a higher pace than both Indiana and Atlanta. You're going to get about an 83, 84 pace possessions per game is what I'm projecting for Chicago and New York. Meanwhile, for Indy and Atlanta, it's around 76. 7 possessions is a huge difference, and that's kind of why you're seeing my projected totals. Vegas doesn't come out yet, so I'm trying to do this on my own. A 148 total over-under for Indy and Atlanta is what I'm projecting. A 158, 10 more real points for Chicago and New York. So yeah, Chicago and New York is the spot that I do want to target today. I think there's going to be good value in the Indy-Atlanta side, or in the Atlanta game, mainly from Atlanta, those guard positions, because Bentley's not playing today. So that's where I'm at right now. No teams are on a back-to-back today. I do want to heavily target Chicago and New York. You can't just stack the whole game, unfortunately. You have to have a piece from another game in the WNBA. So we'll see if we can get some value pieces from Atlanta. That's where I lean early in the day. I do have Indiana being a huge favorite today, which is another reason why Chicago and New York seems more attractive. These teams are better. This game should stay within double digits, which in the WNBA usually means it's a good game, which usually means you're getting full run out of the New York roster. The New York roster is filled with girls who will play right around 30 minutes, if not 4 starters playing 30, and then the other one, which is, as of right now, Britney Boyd, recently continuing to get minutes bumped up closer to that 30 mark. You will get these full starters getting minutes, which again, it makes it more projectable, makes it easier to cash in the WNBA if the game stays close. New York has probably the most consistent starting 4/5 if the game stays close. If it gets wonky and it blows out, well, then anybody goes in that game. But in terms of their depth from their bench, they only use like 3 girls off the bench. In the most part, they're kind of piecing together these starters' minutes. So Chicago, New York is the game to target for me in my eyes, and Atlanta would be some value pieces. Obviously, Indy has some players that are worth rostering, but at the end of the day, Chicago and New York is for me. Let's move over to my early interest. And again, this video is going to be quicker than the past ones because I'm not going to break down my projections. Those are now officially for the people who, lots of people have subscribed over on Patreon, so it's been great. I just want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth and it's not something that I give out to the public every single day, right? So excited to have those now behind or have been on Patreon, and excited to see if people are interested. So these are my early interests, and keep in mind, it is 6:10 in the morning on the East Coast. So, I mean, over 12 hours until the game starts. Maybe we get some news. Like last night we got Candace Parker news. Last night we got Candace Parker news. More minutes. She got the 25 spot on that we projected. We kind of got lucky there. But yes, if you want to see my full minutes projections for these players, my points per minute, and overall their actual points in every single player, I have 38 players, I believe, ranked as of right now, or just projected right now. That's over on Patreon. So these I'm just pulling a few names. And by a few names, I'm pulling a decent amount of names here. I'm pulling like 8 names. So these are people that I have early interest in. This is Sal's player pool. No, that's not how it goes. I mean, there's 38, 39 players that I have in terms of having a projection today. Right around 10 to 12 is what I would have for an initial player pool. So this is not a full player pool. These are just spots at different price points that I find very interesting at their price points, or that I just find as value plays, or maybe they're going to get more minutes due to an injury or somebody playing overseas. Hint, hint, Alex Bentley. So Starting it off, and actually let's just quickly sort this by salary so we can kind of hit on each price range. So at the top range, I mean, you're going to have Tina Charles. You're going to have some other players up there. I prefer Diamond DeShields, a good point per minute producer. Going to be seeing consistent minutes here. I have her projected for over 30 minutes in today's game. She's seeing 28.5 on the year. At that top range in terms of the five-figure prices, I prefer Diamond DeShields. Pure points wise, I prefer Diamond DeShields. You will get a ton more minutes out of Tina Charles. She will push the mid to really mid 30s, 34, 35 range if this game stays close against New York. So getting Diamond DeShields and maybe being able to also afford Charles does make sense to me. But I prefer Wnba Dfs. So Wnba B, I prefer her on New York to Tina Charles. One, because of price. Two, just because of productivity. She's averaging like 1.15 fantasy points per minute in a lot of minutes. She's getting huge minutes on the year. I mean, averaging 27 minutes per game. I have her projected for 31 today. She's been seeing over 30 through the past 3 games. At $9,700, yes, this price point for Wnba B has come up. She was like 8,300 in the last game, and that was just way too cheap, or 2 games ago, way too cheap. 9,700 isn't way too cheap because you're approaching this 5-figure range, but I think it's still cheap. This is a $10,000 player, in my opinion, who's going out there shooting efficiently, picking up peripherals, and staying on the court, the biggest thing, for 80% of the game. So Wnba B right now is my favorite pay-up spot on the entire slate, including the 10K range. I prefer Wnba B. You can see right here. So if you're looking in this yellow column, what does value mean? Value is just a metric that I use. I use it in NBA. I have it different, way different. I use it as a decimal now in the WNBA to look at the field and look at players relative to each other and say, okay, the higher this number, the bigger it gets, the more it approaches 1, the more valuable they are. How do I project this? Well, it looks at the field. It looks at every single person in the player pool, which means every single person that I have ranked. I have 32 players or 39 players projected today, and it says based on their price, based on their minutes projection, based on their matchup, and based on their point per minute production, how efficient they are in getting fantasy points, how good are they at their price point compared to everybody else on this slate. Wnba B right now grades out as the best value at her price point based on everybody else on the slate. Now, that obviously takes into account, 1, her production, her minutes, all of that, but it also, like I said, it's relative to everybody else on the slate. So it means that this slate, it falls into her lap as she is being sort of the most underpriced player with an upside, if that makes sense. You're going to get this ceiling out of her, and that's kind of indicated by her price point, but also have a very high floor, which based on other people's price points, you might not have that high of a floor and that high of a ceiling that makes sense at their price point. Maybe Tina Charles, yes, she has a high floor, but paying all the way up for her near $11,000, whatever it is that worth it for her ceiling where you have another player on the slate like Wnba B for $1,000+ less? So that's what that means, the value. And again, I do exact point projections. I do minute projections. Those are on Patreon. So Jessica Brillen. So there's a couple people on Atlanta that do stand out to me in terms of being more valuable plays, and there's one that we'll get to in a second. But Jessica Brillen would be the pay-up spot, sort of this upper mid-range play that I do like. I like her from Atlanta today. She grades out pretty nicely. There's a couple of players in this price point. Kelsey Mitchell grades out nicely as well. I don't have her in here. They're kind of identical plays in terms of the pure points that they grade out for me. But Tiffany Hayes or Jessica Brillen grades out just a hair better, but it's kind of a toss-up. Tiffany Hayes and Britney Sykes. So this is where your Alex Bentley minutes, I imagine, go for the most part. Now, I have Alex Bentley's minutes, 10 more being split up to a player who I can't remember the name right now. They're in the projections. That has not seen run in a couple of games. But the rest of those minutes, the 23 minutes, I have them split up. The last 13 of those pretty much between Tiffany Hayes and Britney Sykes. Maybe I gave 1 or 2 more to some of the other studs on the Atlanta team. Tiffany Hayes, who usually sees about 25, 26 minutes per game, I have her as of right now, I believe, at 30. What does that do for her? It obviously increases her fantasy point per minute production, and to me, she's already priced up kind of with Alex Bentley being out. Maybe she should be closer to 8,400, but for the most part, she's not underpriced. Now, the player I want to get to is Britney Sykes. Britney Sykes has been a better point per minute producer than Tiffany Hayes, and now she's $700 cheaper, and also seeing 27 minutes per game. I believe I have her projected for 32 minutes today. I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to check that. But at her price point at $7,400, she becomes one of the best value plays on the slate based on the fact that I'm assuming she gets more run. She's a good point per minute producer in a decent matchup here, or a good matchup here. So, yeah, I have Britney Sykes as a very good mid-range play, if not the best mid-range play at the guard position. Stefanie Dolson for Chicago, again, getting back to the Chicago-New York game where I want to emphasize it due to the high total and the high pace. At 7,200, she's another good play. She grades out pretty similar to Britney Sykes for me. I think Sykes has more upside just because there's more a bigger avenue to more minutes there. But Stefanie Dolson does grade out nicely. Brittany Boyd. So here's the thing. We talked about New York having 4 players that are going to see right around 30 minutes. And that's definitely the case. Amanda B, you're going to get Kia Nurse, Tina Charles, and then you're going to get Asia Durr. But Brittany Boyd's minutes continue to come up. We saw 22 minutes, and then 26 minutes. When the game stays close, and if it stays close today, which I projected to, and I really hate projecting blowouts, but this game I do project to stay close. Brittany Boyd is going to see around 25 plus minutes. That's where I have her at projected today in terms of her minute projection, somewhere around there. That makes her grade out really nicely. I have her as a 0.39 value, a top 3 or 4 value play in the slate at 6,900. This should probably be a mid 7K player, especially because her point per minute production is over 0.9, which the average NBA player is around 0.8. Asia Durr, same on the same team, has a more stable route to us, or has a more easier route to stable minutes around 30-31. I have her projected around that range today. 6,300, she's a good value play. She just does not have this ceiling on her, and her floor is shaky because she's a bad fantasy point per minute producer. Brittany Boyd is a much more productive player. If Boyd starts to stay on the court more, well then yeah, I like Boyd. The price kind of indicates that, a $600 difference, but Durr is definitely in play at 6,300 as a value. So if I had to give you one throw the dart down and go find a value play, Rashonda Gray at $4,600. Look, she doesn't get the biggest minutes in the world. I have her projected really in the mid-teens, which I never like doing for the WNBA because these players that come off the bench, their minutes, one, are not stable. They usually jump around. Now, Rashonda Gray's, for the most part, are going between a range of like 13 and 18, 13 and 17, have her at 16 today. So I feel a little bit more stable with that, which is a very good point per minute producer for this range. When she's on the court, she's adding to that plus minus with the plus side, right? She's scoring, she's playing good defense. So Rashonda Gray at 4,600, if she was to see the higher range or around 16, 17 minutes today, for a player who does average right around a point per minute production, which you're not going to find much of below $5,000 on a WNBA slate, yeah, she makes sense to me. Now, let's get this straight. If you're somebody who's watching my videos and just plugging in every single person you see on this little thing right here, that's not the best way to go. It is 6 in the morning. My research has been about an hour or two long. I get it. That's more in depth than most people. But if you're just plugging and playing the pieces that I have here, that's not the correct way to do this. The correct way is to kind of take my free advice, kind of take the way that I approach it and apply that to the way that you approach it. Don't just say, okay, I'm going to plug in these 6 players and see how they fit. No. That's probably not the best way to approach this. Don't just say, oh, Rashonda Gray's the best value on the slate. No. She's 4,600. There's different price ranges. And there's more news, maybe, that can come out later in the day. This is where I stand at 6 in the morning on the East Coast. So, yes, 6 in the morning, 3 in the morning if you're waking up on the West Coast. This is an early look. It's an early interest. These are not picks. This is just what I find interesting early on. There's obviously other top-end options that are more than fine and might find their way into my lineups. Same with every other range. This is what I'm looking at right now. Hope the video helps. My name's Sal. Again, you can go over to Patreon. You can support me by getting my WNBA projections. I have an all-access pass that encompasses WNBA, MLB, where I now also include my favorite stacks and pitchers before lock in terms of ranking them. Golf will be updated today for tomorrow's tournament. And then the NFL, when that comes, you could also just get WNBA on its own. Follow me on Twitter at SalVetri_DFS. Ask me any questions that you want over there. I will be sure to answer. My name is Sal. Best of luck. Subscribe before you leave. Subscribe. Take 2 seconds. Peace out, gang.